successful. I look for and find opportunities where others see nothing. I am a lifetime learner. I am solution focused. I see only solutions. I am a solution. Let me formally welcome you to the Be Transformed Tribe on Clubhouse. I'm the catalyst. My name is Lanre Olusola, and this is your special dual go-to space for practical, spirit and mind transforming conversations that empower you to overcome all of life's biggest challenges. Together, we'll transform your mind, will empower your spirit, and will activate you to become all that you were created to be. And today, we're talking about healing childhood traumas. And, interestingly, the first leaning into the conversation is, does trauma begin even before you're born? Yeah. Does trauma begin even before you are born, or does trauma begin after you are born? I think the very first thing is for us to define what trauma is. For us to look at trauma from an energy perspective, and then for us to define what childhood trauma is, and then the difference between both. And then I'll get into the conversation around, can you therefore suffer trauma? Can trauma start whilst the baby is still in the womb, and or after? And I would share a one of my clients. I'll share a story from one of my clients. So, in simple terms, what is trauma? Trauma is simply an emotional wound. It is not the event itself, but the internal experience that you carry after something painful, something frightening, and something overwhelming happens. Note. So trauma is not the event. Trauma is not the event, but how we internally memorize it, how we internally experience it based on our interpretation of it, right? And it's based on a painful experience, it's based on a frightening experience, and it's based on an overwhelming experience. So, let me leave the example. Now, trauma is therefore not about what happened, but how the mind and the emotion and the body processes and stores what happened. So if we look at trauma from an energy psychology perspective, right? Trauma is trapped or frozen energy. So when something painful, when something overwhelming, when something, scary happens, we process it in a way that the body literally stores the energy, and the energy gets stuck in our nervous system. So that frozen energy shows up later on, right? It's triggered later on, and it shows up suddenly as anger, unexplained anxiety, chronic body pain, or reoccurrences of nightmares. So instead of energy flowing freely, right, life forces are trapped in the memory of that pain in our energetic system. So having looked at trauma and looked at trauma from an energy perspective, what is now childhood trauma? So childhood trauma is the trauma that happens before you are emotionally, mentally, and physically mature enough to process it. Now, this is because as children, we don't yet have a language. We don't yet have a coping strategy or the ability to rationalize those painful events that cut deeper, shaping our self-image, our sense of trust, and our view of the world. So if we now look at trauma, right, and we look at childhood trauma, right, we realize that there's a difference. Trauma can happen at any stage in our lives. Now, if trauma happens to you at an adult stage, you would have developed the mental, emotional, spiritual skills and ability, right, to process it in a different way. But the child does not have the brain development, does not have the emotional capacity or the mental capacity to process it. So trauma is more dangerous for a child because it becomes part of that child's foundation. So childhood trauma often dictates how that child will begin to think, how that child will begin to feel, how that child will begin to experience and interact with love, interact with trust at that age and in their adulthood. So now, once you are in your third trimester in the womb, you're actually formed. And that's why, in the third trimester, right, a baby can be given birth to and put in an incubator. Why? Because all the organs are already formed, but you just need that last trimester, to get stronger and get ready to come into the real world. So the child, right, is actually a child in the third trimester. So what happens to a child that is born, right, and a child that is in the third trimester is the same thing. Now, I want us to understand trauma and child trauma from a deeper perspective. But I want to share 10 very, very, or maybe about 8 or 9 very powerful statements that were made by Dr. Gabor Mate, a global trauma expert. The first thing that I want to share is that trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you because of what happened to you. So trauma is not the event. Is the effect that the event created inside you. The second thing that I want to tell us is that every addiction is an attempt to solve a trauma pain problem. Every addiction, every strong, powerful craving or addiction is an attempt to solve a trauma pain problem. The third thing that I want to talk about, right, from that perspective, that trauma makes us lose touch with who we really are. Yeah, trauma disconnects us from our true essence and our true identity. 4, children are traumatized not by the hurt, but because they live alone with the hurt. Wow. Children are not traumatized by the hurt, but because they are lonely mentally, they are lonely emotionally, they are lonely spiritually, right? They are lonely, living lonely with the hurt. Why? Because they can't express themselves. They don't have the vocabulary or the language to express how they really, really feel. The fifth thing that I want to share is that trauma, right, is trying to respond normally to an abnormal circumstance. That's why you become dysfunctional. When you are trying to act or respond normally to something that is abnormal. Number 6, most times we shut down our vulnerability in response to trauma. And then, because we shut down our vulnerability, we automatically shut down our capacity for joy, our capacity for love, and our capacity for connection with ourselves and connection with other people and connection with the world. Number 7, unhealed trauma shows up in our body. It shows up in our relationships. It shows up in our finances. It shows up in our parenting. It shows up in every area of our lives. Number 8, the successful key to trauma healing is not to try and erase the memory of the past, but to reclaim your power in the present. The last thing that I want to share is that trauma healing is about reconnecting with your true essence and your true identity and yourself. So in summary, right, trauma is about disconnection from self, from others, and from your life. Trauma healing is about reconnection. It's about compassion. It's about empathy. It's about finding yourself again. But most importantly, finding safety, from deep within you. So, trauma, child trauma, or third trimester trauma, all are very, very dangerous. You see, how an adult will interpret a situation will be different from how a child will interpret the same situation. If whether it's a 40-year-old adult or a 30-year-old adult or a 20-year-old adult or even an 18-year-old adult will be completely different from how a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, an 11-year-old will receive it, and the effect of that same situation on that child. So there are loads of things that we do not know will traumatize a child that we do as adults, simply because as adults, we can handle it. We understand it. We think that's the norm because that's the tradition and the culture that we subscribe to. We think that the child is formed. We forget that the child is still a child that is forming. Wow. So I'm going to share with us, right, 10 of the most common and dangerous types of things that we do that can cause a child trauma and the effects that it will create in the child's life in the future. So first one is physical abuse. Caning a child. Caning a child is physical abuse. There are some parents that their problem is not with the child. Their problem is that the child is the husband's favorite child. And so they want to get at the father because the father has just cheated on the mother. So they cannot attack the father directly, but they take out the anger, the pain on the child. The father knows what he has done, but the father cannot even protect the child. Physical abuse. Honestly, when we were growing up, we were beaten blue-black. What we did not merit the kind of beating that we got. I got beaten a lot. And the manner and the anger and the kind of beating that you got, honestly, today is classified as physical abuse. And this leads to anger issues in that child's life in the future. It leads to violence issues in that child's life in the future as an adult. It leads to low self-worth in that child's life in the future. It leads to fear and anxiety in that child's life in adulthood. The second one is emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is when you restrain love, care from a child. There's an absence of the fundamental emotions that you need. Empathy, love, compassion is absent or is intentionally withdrawn. This leads to, in adulthood, it leads to anxiety. It leads to depression. It leads to perfectionism. The third one is sexual abuse. Oh my God. This one in adulthood leads to shame. It leads to trust issues in relationships. It leads to intimacy struggles, sexual intimacy struggles, and vulnerability issues. The fourth one is emotional and physical neglect, complete absenteeism. It leads to attachment issues in the future and loneliness, even in the midst of people. You are there in the midst of people, you still feel lonely and alone. And it leads to serious attachment issues. 5, bullying. Bullying leads to social anxiety, but most importantly, it leads to an imposter syndrome. It leads to inferiority complex and low self-worth, low self-esteem, and low self-confidence. Number 6 is parental divorce or parental separation. Oh my God, especially when that child is young. It leads to that child in the future living with a fear of abandonment. That child will begin to attract unhealthy relationships. That child would have an issue with attachment. Number 7 is loss of a parent or loss of a sibling. This leads in the future to unresolved grief, fear of loss, hyper independence. That person does not feel like they need anybody in this world. They can cut anybody off. When you lose a parent early, hyper independence, that is, you are solo. You have developed a coping mechanism to live solo in this world. No matter what it is, you can live solo. Number 8, exposure to domestic violence. That is, you are a witness to domestic violence. That is, you just observe your father and your mother. Your father beating your mother beating your father, right? That's you normalize abuse. You think that is the norm. And so you learn it and you become an abuser too. It leads to difficulty in managing conflicts. You lack emotional intelligence. The only way to resolve conflicts is by beating, is by violence. Why? Because that's all you've learned. That's all you know. Another one is sustained abuse in the home. It leads to all manner of instability in your life in adulthood. It leads to lack of trust. It leads to fear of repeated patterns. The last one that I want to share is when you are being shamed or constantly compared to your siblings, constantly compared to your classmates. Okay, why did you come third? The person that came first, does that person have two heads? Why can't you be like your sister? This destroys people's self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence. It creates an imposter syndrome. Now, it's important that we note that childhood trauma results in serious adulthood problems. Childhood trauma does not vanish because you grow older. If it is untreated, if it is unhealed, it grows with you and invariably it shows up in your marriage. It shows up in your parenting. It shows up in your life because you have the same cycles of life. It shows up in your career. You begin to sabotage yourself because you have a low self-worth, low self-esteem, low self-confidence and self-belief. It affects your health. Your level of stress is astronomically high. And you stop pain in your body and you begin to experience chronic illnesses. So it's important for us, if we experience the deepest forms of abuse, neglect, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, honestly, these traumas will show up in a deadly way in your adulthood because they touch the very core needs of a child. Every child desires to be loved. Every child desires psychological and emotional safety. Every child desires to be seen, to be heard, to be held. Every child desires to be valued. Every child desires for their self-worth, their self-esteem, their self-confidence, and self-belief to be developed as they are growing up. And so, if you suffer those traumas, then you desperately need help. Because certainly, those traumas will show up in adulthood in very, very unhealthy ways. How can healing begin? When the parents are ignorant, that means that you will live with the trauma. So, or you will live with the abuser, meaning that you have to learn coping mechanisms. That's what it means. Now, how do you learn coping mechanisms in an environment that the trauma still goes on? How can you cope? So, I'm going to use the acronym MANAGE to try and help us, because the, the, the people that are supposed to be protecting the child, the environment that's supposed to be psychologically and emotionally safe for the child is completely absent. The child cannot escape or leave that environment yet. And it may not even be a child. It may be an adult that is going through, abuse, whether emotional abuse, whether it's psychological abuse, whether it's physical abuse. That's still trauma. So in a situation where the victim cannot leave the environment physically, then that victim has to learn how to cope. Now, in a situation where that victim cannot access therapy immediately, then that victim must learn to cope. So I'm going to use an acronym that I will call MANAGE, a 6-step process, right? The first thing that victim needs to do, that victim needs to be mindful. That victim needs to stay present, right? That victim needs to start to journal, meditate, and manage their own emotions. So that victim needs to start to meditate. That victim needs to learn how to manage their state and their emotions through mindfulness. They have to stay present, not recalling the experience and how the experience made them feel. Not living in the future, anticipating when the next traumatic event will happen. They have to learn to live in the present. And they have to learn to meditate or manage their state, their breathing, their emotions in the moment. Now, M, that's manage, right? That's mindfulness. A, that victim needs to raise their level of awareness. What are they looking for? They want to be aware about the triggers. So they don't want to live in denial, right? They want to be aware of what triggers the abuser and what triggers the most deadly emotions in them, the victim. And they want to manage those two triggers. What triggers the abuser? What do they do? Or what is it within the environment that triggers the abuser? They want to manage that trigger. What is it that triggers their own deadly emotions within them? They want to manage that trigger. Awareness of triggers. The third thing is the end nurture. They have to choose themselves and care for themselves. And the self-care is they have to sleep well. They have to eat healthy. They have to rest well. Meditation must become a food for them. They must go and develop emotional intelligence and emotional emotional resilience. So they must nurture their soul, they must nurture their spirit, they must nurture their body, they must elevate their spirituality, they must feed and nurture their soul, and they must feed and nurture their bodies. They must take special care of themselves. They must ask for help. They must look for where they can find psychological and emotional safety and therapy. They must also look for a community that will support them, a group of people that will be like-minded, right? That will help build that emotional resilience and build that self-confidence, build that self-esteem, build that self-worth and self-belief. They must ask for help. They cannot afford to be isolated, alone. G, they must live a life of gratitude. They must focus on what is good and still good in their lives, in the lives of the abuser, in their environment. Because gratitude often shifts negative energy and transitions it towards positive. So count it all joy. Be grateful and thankful when you go through all manner of tribulation and trauma. E stands for expression. Write down your experience. Write down how you are feeling. Learn to draw as well. Learn to sing about your feelings. Make sure that you find somebody that you can share with. What you don't want to do is to bottle it up. So, to be able to manage the situation and cope in that environment, you have to be mindful, you have to be aware, you have to nurture your spirit, your soul, your body. You have to ask for help. You have to live in gratitude, and most importantly, you have to express how you are feeling. You know, one of the things that trauma does is that trauma trauma tremble, so when you say there's a trauma at the scale of, an earthquake, right? There was an earth trauma, a tremble. So if we understand what that means, right? When things begin to shake, what begins to happen is the integrity of the substance begins to fail, and the things that are bind it together begins to separate itself. So you have to recognize that we're tripartite in nature. We're spirit, soul, body. When trauma happens, right, our spirits, our soul, our bodies begin to separate themselves. They are not as, you are not whole. Wholeness is when spirit, soul, and body is intact. Now, the truth of the matter, right, is you are created to be whole. Life's experiences and our lifestyle and our choices cause us not to be whole. The absence of wholeness, right, is the presence of lack of health and well-being. So trauma causes your spirit, your soul, and your body not to be united, not to be bound together. So you cannot heal, completely, truly heal without wholeness. And so in striving to attain wholeness, there is no way that you can truly be whole without developing your spirit, your soul, and nurturing your body. All three are very, very important for you to attain wholeness, which invariably becomes healing. True healing is the attainment of wholeness. And there is no wholeness without spiritual development, soul development, and physical development. So, you can't just go for help physically and not go for help soulishly and not go for help spiritually. Meaning that you must, of essence, nurture your spirit back to wholeness. Nurture your soul back to wholeness. Nurture your body back to wholeness. And that is why integrative therapy and coaching is the key to wholeness and true healing. Why? Because integrative therapy and coaching integrates spirituality with everything that has to do with mind and soul and emotional healing and physical healing. So, no true wholeness or healing can happen without spiritual healing, soul healing, and physical healing. And that's why integrative therapy and integrative coaching is the key to the attainment of wholeness and true healing. I feel like, it's important for me to say a few more things about the need to get healing and therapy from an integrative perspective. 1. 2, for us to know the real, some additional effects of trauma in our lives, so that when we are seeing those things in our lives, we will know that, this is the effect of trauma. Let me go and get help. Do you know, right, that a child can be running your life as a 58-year-old man? We had and there are many episodes and there are many sessions that I've had that the 40-year-old, the 35-year-old, the 50-year-old, the 60-year-old behaves like a child when it comes to particular issues. And it's the 8-year-old traumatized child that makes the decision and controls the 60-year-old adult. So the energy of that traumatized child is still in control of even the adult. Oh, yes. And I'll give you several examples. In abandonment trauma, as an adult, you become clingy in all your relationships. You are afraid that they will leave you. If you are clingy, you become a parasite in your relationships. And you will find out that it's difficult for you to keep any relationship. You will find out that you attract low-life people who need fixing. Low-life people who you feel you have to fix them, and you feel you have to cling to them. So if you are clinging as a mother, if you are clingy as a spouse, if you are clingy as a friend, you suffered abandonment trauma. You need to get help quickly before you destroy yourself and subsequent relationships. Now, if you avoid opportunities because you're afraid to fail, or you're afraid about what people will think or what people will say, or you're afraid of criticisms, that's the result of rejection trauma. So instead of you pursuing opportunities to achieve great results, what is driving you is the fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of what people will say, the fear of missing out, the fear of what people will think. You need to quickly get help. When you are overworking, When you overgive, when you are constantly looking for external validation and you are constantly waiting for people to notice and acknowledge you, that is the sign of neglect trauma. You need help quickly. When you unconsciously choose partners or bosses who mistreat you, who abuse you, and you feel like that is real love and that is normal, you are suffering from abuse trauma. You need help. You are going through cycles of partners that have mistreated you. They continue to mistreat you, whether it's even a boss. You constantly go and work in a place, and every boss or most of the bosses you have worked for have mistreated you. And most of the partners, right, in your intimate relationships have mistreated you. Or you have friends that have power over you and mistreat you, and you think that that is normal. You are suffering from abuse trauma. Go and get help. When you constantly feel as if you are not good enough, everybody is finer than you. Most people are more intelligent than you. Most people are doing better than you. And you are constantly self-sabotaging. Even when success is around the corner, you are suffering from shame trauma. You need help. And you should not ignore or suppress this trauma, because trauma does not die with time. It hides. And guess what? It cannot be ignored. It will leak out. It will end up in depression. It will end up in one form of substance addiction. It will end up in broken marriages and relationships. It will end up in anger. It will end up in poor parenting. It will end up in ill health. It is either you go and get help and you heal from it, or it will haunt you. It will haunt you in your sleep. It will steal your peace, your joy. It will destroy your career, and you will pass it down to your children. Let me get you to understand that trauma can be passed down from one generation to the other generation. Oh yes, trauma can be passed down from one generation to the other generation. Biologically through epigenetics, stress hormones change DNA expressions. Psychologically through learned behaviors, an abused child often becomes an abusive parent. That's right. Spiritually and energetically through unbroken cycles. Abuse, poverty trauma, fear trauma, shame, addiction, war-related trauma are passed down from one generation to the other generation. So it is very, very important. If you do not want to destroy your children through wrong parenting, if you want to fix your self-image, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your self-belief, if you want to experience true love, it's important that if you suffer abandonment and rejection, you should go and get help. Oh yes, if you suffered sexual abuse and emotional abuse, you should go and get help. If you suffered neglect, you should go and get help. If you suffered constant shaming and comparisons, you should go and get help. Honestly, you will transfer it. You will suffer for it if you do not get treatment. Now, what kind of treatments are available and are effective? Because trauma can be treated when you revisit the wound safely, when you release the stuck emotions and the energy, when you rewire your mind with new beliefs, when you rebuild your life with new behaviors. What did I say? Four critical things. Make sure that you find how to identify the wound and you revisit it to treat it safely. 2, when you find those stuck emotions and energy and you find an expert that can help you release it, where you begin to rewire your thoughts and your mind and you begin to change your belief system, find an expert to help you. Why? Because limiting negative, disempowering beliefs and negative limiting thought patterns can destroy you. So find a mind and an integrative coach that can help you reprogram, reframe, eliminate, and change your limiting beliefs and rewire your mind. When your behaviors are dysfunctional and you know that, oh no, this behavior could normal, then it's time for you to rebuild your life. And I'm going to speak to 7 most effective trauma cures and interventions. The first one is psychotherapy. And there are 3 very powerful psychotherapy interventions. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, and DPT. The second one is somatic experiences, where we release trauma that is stored energetically in the body through sounds, through movement, through vibrations. The third one is what we call EMDR, that is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. We store a lot of trauma around our eyes. So we help the brain reprocess traumatic memories, and we release those memories and those traumas that are stored. Inner child work. This is where we take you back to your childhood, and we go and help you heal from that wound, and we release all the wisdom that you need to release from it, and we release all the energy. The fifth one is energy psychology. Through emotional freedom techniques, tapping, through breath work, or through meditation, we release trapped energy. Oh yes, and we restore the flow of your energetic system. The sixth one is group therapy and creating a psychologically and emotionally safe community. A lot of people do not understand, right, how a lot of issues in their lives are being resolved by just being members of my community. It is because my communities are designed in a way where it provides psychological, spiritual, and emotional safety as a group. This helps break shame, and this helps reinforce a belief that you are not alone. It helps give assurance that you have support. The seventh intervention is faith and spiritual healing, where you need to forgive the offender and the oppressor. You need to pray. You need to surrender your will to the Almighty God. You need to find your purpose, and the purpose for which the reason why you went through that trauma, and you need to elicit the wisdom in it. You need to be a higher person, a bigger person. You need to attain to a higher self, and you experience God's unconditional love, because only God's love can truly, truly heal you. Look, it's important for us to recognize that trauma is not your fault, but healing, especially your own healing, is your own responsibility. You may not have chosen what happened to you, but you can choose what you do with the knowledge that you have right now. Why? Because your healing is in your hands, and healing is possible. And the truth is that the story that has been written concerning you from your traumatized days can be changed, can be rewritten, and the codes that is running you can be completely changed. And so it is therefore very, 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 very important for you to make a decision, for you to attain wholeness and healing today. And so if you found today's message to be of great value for you, this conversation has touched you in a positive way, and you know other people that what I've described today is what they are suffering from. The help that I'm talking about today is the help that they need. Then get in touch with me, right? On my social media. Send me an email, right? At info@olcang.com or catalyst@thecatalystng.com. You need therapy, you need coaching, you need wholeness. You need to deal with this trauma. Reach out to me and my team, and we will help you. But let's get started together to begin to heal the world by sharing this message with everybody you know. Don't just be the only one that has heard it. Share the message wide. Thank you very much. God bless you. I am successful. I look for and find opportunities where others see nothing. I am a lifetime learner. I am solution focused. I see only solutions. I am a solution.